Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Moffitt and Chapel Band. Glad to see you in chapel this morning. Wasn't Tuesday's chapel terrific with Mitch Toll, the artist? What an unusual combination of elements that was, and I'm so glad to see you respond so positively to him. I know it warmed him, and it certainly warmed me. And today, you know, it's my turn to take my turn in the pulpit, and I'm glad it is, because I have a feeling, you know, I can't articulate it very well, but it's a feeling that I haven't been able to get away from this week. Somebody in today's chapel whose name I don't know and whose face I don't recognize and whose story I couldn't tell might need to hear the rather somewhat negative thing I've got to share this morning. I shouldn't really call it negative. It's not even a sermon. It's just one big fat analogy, one metaphor I want to share with you. Now, we do many things in the chapel period. Sometimes we introduce athletic teams, and sometimes we introduce scholarship winners, and sometimes we just have kind of like a town hall meeting. In November, we have one of these Ask the President days scheduled, you know, which nothing religious about that, I guarantee you. And this is sort of our town hall. This is our gathering place. And so I want to share with you something before I start to share with you what I think God would have us reflect on. This has nothing to do with God. It has nothing to do with religion. It's just about the Lee family. Kind of an announcement. And some of you know about a Lee student named Jordan Smith. It's sort of the buzz around the music department, I'm sure. Jordan Smith has been from time to time on our chapel band, and he's part of the tech crew here in Conn Center, who sets up for our chapels. And he came by the end of the summer and told us he thought he needed to take a semester off because he was going to take a shot at this television singing competition called The Voice. Now, you remember that we just had Clark Beckham in here, and he, right after graduation, went over and took a shot at American Idol. It turned out to be quite a terrific shot. I mean, it was a great run for him, and we were all very proud of him and felt like he was able to use that opportunity, and we'll continue to use that opportunity for witness. Well, now here we got another Lee student. He's not even graduated yet, so he's having to take a semester off. So last semester, he was up here scrambling around, setting up the stage and singing with the chapel band and in the Lee Singers, and next semester he'll be back doing the same thing. But this semester he's up in New York with this singing competition, and they have this thing called, if you don't know this show, they have this thing, first of all, called blind auditions. Got 4 judges. They sit with their back to the singer, and if they like the singer, they push a button and their chair spins around, and that singer gets to stay on the show. Now, if you're lucky, you get 2 people who like you and turn their chairs around. If you're really sensational, you get all 4. And if you get that kind of nod, then you stay on the show for a little while. So our boy Jordan was on The Voice, and his blind audition, as they call them, was a couple of weeks ago. And so for those of you who haven't heard about it, my guess is we're going to be hearing more about it. So I thought, well, I'll just announce that. We're going to pull for him. We're going to pray for him. And let's watch this clip which shows his audition and what happened when he appeared on The Voice. Okay.
Party girls, don't get hurt, can't feel anything. When will I learn? I push it down, I push it down.
Yeah.
I'm the one for a good time call. Phone's blowing up, ringing my doorbell. Feel the love, I feel the love. Oh, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, drink. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, drink. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, drink. Throw it back till I lose count. I'm gonna sing from the chandelier, from the chandelier. I'm gonna live like tomorrow. tears as they dry. One is sweet from the chandelier, from the chandelier. I'm holding on for dear life. Won't look down, won't open my eyes. Keep my glass full until morning light. 'Cause I'm just holding on for tonight, on for tonight, on for tonight.
Oh my God, you shocked me! You're so amazing!
I don't know if I'm happy or really scared.
Who do you pick as your coach?
I'm gonna have to go with what I feel, and I pick Adam.
Okay, now how can you not like this guy? All right, he's from Harlan, Kentucky. He's a Lee student, and so all this is happening in his life, you know? So, you know what I want for him? You know what the president does? I'm the sort of the chief cheerleader for Lee students. And no matter what they're doing out there, unless they're doing wrong, I'm somewhere rooting for them. So, you know, I hope Jordan just turns out well for him. I don't have any idea what that means, but we do know that he moved to the next round, and I think the next round is on TV next week. Is that correct? Does anybody know about The Voice? So apparently the national TV audience is going to see Jordan again. But let me tell you what happened. All these kids, all these singers, ranging from about 15, I think, to 51, I read somewhere, come and audition for this, and a lot of them moved to the next round. But Jordan's, this performance you saw was a sensation. And I went on Google to see on the YouTube hits, the people that had watched this video clip we just saw. Now, there's a massive audience for this show, and so everyone who advances to the next round has their video clip put up, and they average about 300,000 or 400,000 hits or watches on these. I've checked this morning or last night, and Jordan has over 9 million people have watched this little piece of video. And it's just way off the charts. The point is, there's something about him, something about that's different and unusual and engaging, and the judges see it, and I don't know what all that was about. I don't really know this show. The girl in the red dress, you know, who turned around and saw Adam and kicked her leg up here. I didn't really get that part. I guess that was good, but so anyway, I don't know much about the pop culture, but I'm going to be pulling for Jordan, and I'll be looking forward to talking with him, and we'll wish him well, won't we? So I wanted to share that with you. Now, you know, a few years ago, a new phrase entered our vocabulary. The phrase is what I want to talk about for these next few minutes, and it is a phrase that comes from a story, a true story that was first a book, then a popular movie. And it kind of captured a phrase that's been part of the popular coinage ever since. And so what I want to do, instead of preaching a sermon, I just want to share with you an analogy, one analogy, a metaphor. And it comes from this incident. The phrase is the perfect storm. Now, we use that phrase quite commonly now, but it actually began to be used generally about 10 or 12 or 15 years ago when a book was written by a guy named Sebastian Junger. That's not particularly important. Sebastian Junger writes nonfiction books, and this book was called The Perfect Storm, and it told the story of a commercial fishing boat named the Andrea Gail that sailed out of Gloucester, Massachusetts, fishing for swordfish. The swordfish fishing is very dangerous and very lucrative. These boats will go out into the North Sea waters and stay sometimes as long as 25 to 30 days to try to catch enough fish to fill up the boat. And if they have a good run, they can come back and really make a lot of money, make thousands of dollars each that month. This was a crew of 6 fishermen, a rough bunch, because this occupation attracts kind of a rough bunch. And this is their story. Now, it was made into a movie, and the movie starred George Clooney and Mark Wahlberg. And this movie came out in the year 2000, so this is 15 years ago. So it's kind of a young-looking George Clooney who played the role of the captain and owner of this boat, the Andrea Gail. And he had on board with him the second in command, his first mate. The role was played by Wahlberg, so Mark Wahlberg. So this movie came out and was a big movie. Now, I understand for most of you that was long ago and you haven't seen this movie, but if you get a chance to see it, you have a slow weekend or, God forbid, or rain here in Cleveland, you might want to watch this. And I'm not recommending it because I honestly don't remember. It's probably got a lot of bad language in it. And I don't want you to say, Dr. Conn said, watch this movie, and they said bad words. And I don't think there's any sex or violence in it, but it's a rough story because it's about a rough episode. So, you take your chances. But here's what happened, and here's what the perfect storm is all about. A perfect storm is a rare and deadly convergence. That's our key word, convergence. It's a convergence of more than one storm. And what Sebastian Junger, by the way, there's a new movie out right now called Everest, which tells the story of some guys that got killed climbing Mount Everest. And same author, Sebastian Junger, and he also had a best-selling book called Into Thin Air, which tells that story. He says what happens was at some rare times, one really big storm converges with another really big storm. In this particular case, 3 storms happened to converge and create what he called the perfect storm. So what happened was there was a typical hurricane. This happened in late October, hurricane season in the Caribbean. A hurricane came up from the Caribbean, came up the Atlantic, and came up from Bermuda, headed toward the coast off of New England. At the same time, there was a cold front that created a storm coming down from Nova Scotia. Hurricane Grace was warm and moist and was itself a threat. But the cold front that came down from Newfoundland was so intense that it created 30-foot seas as it came off of Nova Scotia into that area where they were fishing for swordfish. At the same time, there was a storm across the Great Lakes out in the Midwest that came across from the west and poured into New England from the west. These 3 storms converged in what Junger called in his book a meteorological hell, on October 28, 1991. Now, Junger says in the book that they've been keeping records on the intensity of North Sea storms since the year 1900, 115 years. And he says this is among the 5 most intense storms since they started keeping records in 1900. And what happened was a fleet of about 10 or so sword fishing boats on their last trip of the season before the weather gets too bad, they have to bring the boats in and put them out again the next year. These guys making a living, hoping for a big catch, have gone way far off of the Boston coast. Gloucester, Mass. is just up the shore from Boston. And on their last run of the year, they get caught up there in this quote-unquote meteorological hell. And what happened set the stage for this story that was written in the book that was called The Perfect Storm, the story and later the movie and the analogy I want to use today. So what I've got is about just a short clip. These guys get caught in the storm. They don't know quite what to do. They've got to make a decision to stay and ride it out or to go into safer waters, and they stay until the decision is made for them. And this is a little clip that's at that stage in the story as the storm is really becoming very intense. Let's take a look at this.
Skip, we're gonna make it. She's not gonna let us out.
Now, that's a pretty intense scene. That's a pretty scary big wave. And, we won't talk about what happened after that. Spoiler alert, there is a marker in Gloucester, Massachusetts for these 6 guys. And my wife and I went up there one time and took a look. The locals will tell you where they filmed The Perfect Storm. It's a big story because it's a story about this unusual convergence of events that put people in real danger. Now, Wikipedia, that most favored source of information, that authoritarian scholar's device, actually defines a perfect storm in the last few years. And here's what it says. It says, a perfect storm, citing this story, is an event where a rare combination of circumstances will aggravate a situation drastically. Convergence of 3 powerful sources. And from the moment first time I read this book and then I saw this movie, I wondered, is going to college a perfect storm? And for some people, it is. And one of the reasons I think that the issues in college are so intense, all kinds of issues of faith and personal worldview, intellectual issues, or issues of personal morality, sexual issues, issues having to do with substances, or issues of ethics, of cheating, or personal morality in ethical decisions, issues of personal relationships and what we do about them and what represents respect in personal relationships, issues having to do with creating new boundaries for our parents in our lives, new ways of connecting with people that we know and love, but that represent an earlier period of our lives. You know, college life might be, for many people, a perfect storm in which at least three very powerful forces come together. I think those three forces are these. First of all, leaving home with all of its familiar controls. Now, some of you have been gone from home a long time. I understand that. Some of you have only been gone from home a couple of months. You left home really for the first time middle of August, and now it's not even quite the middle of October. Some of you are really leaving home literally for the first time. Others have been here for 2 or 3 years, but clearly, the college period is a period in which one of the big forces is leaving, not just not living under our parents' roof, it's the loss of the controls that were a part of that life. Controls we didn't like a lot of the time. Controls in some of your families that were unnecessary and excessive. And if I could sit down with each one of you and talk about what it was like living in your home before you got away, whether you got away to come to Lee or some other place on the way to Lee, I'm sure some of you would tell me stories. I've heard lots of stories about really over-controlling parents, smothering mothers, neurotic dads, families where, you felt like you were being treated like a child long after you became a young adult. I understand all those stories. Some of you have those stories. Some of you don't have that kind of story at all. You have a story of a life in which it wasn't your family in the home that created the controls. It was some controls you sought on an athletic team or in a church youth group or with a group of friends. But the point is, there is a familiar, a kind of what one psychologist calls automatic intimacy that we get when we're kids. And when we leave that, we lose the controls, and we have to either put in a new set of monitors and boundaries and controls, or we find ourselves sort of bouncing around, and we don't have that comfortable bracket to tell us when we've gone too far in any aspect of our life. So the first force that occurs at this time in your life is the loss of familiar surroundings and the controls. The second is exposure to new ideas, new people, and new temptations. Now, this is not the most diverse campus in the world, but this is probably not like, it doesn't replicate your youth group or your community or your Christian school that you went to or your set of friends back home. And, there are new people here, new ideas here. We want you to stretch here. We want you to encounter the unfamiliar here. We want you to grow, and to grow, you have to have the pressure of new ideas. But new ideas and new people in your life, because you come to a place like this and you don't really have any idea what kinds of people you're going to find yourselves connecting with and opening up to. And third, it's the most intense period in your life of natural drives. Developmentally, you're not a kid anymore, but you're not a fully settled adult anymore. And you're in that great, dynamic, intense period of the acceleration of becoming a fully mobilized human being. And so you have this drive to explore that intensifies at this stage in your life. Your desire to fulfill appetites, which intensifies in this stage of your life. This is the period of the accelerating, intensifying, personal juice of life. And it's exciting, but it can be toxic. So what happens if these three forces collide in such a way to create the perfect storm for you? And I'm not going to go into a lot of details or tell a lot of stories, but I've seen it happen over and over. I've seen students come to Lee and maybe somehow think because we try to be a Christ-centered campus that we're going to create the controls, and we're not. You get here and realize, no, we're not. Are we going to screen out the negative and non-productive and temptations or people or ideas or influences? No, we aren't capable of doing that. or somehow we're going to be the safety zone for your life. And college wasn't intended to be that, and Christian colleges are not intended to be that way. Now, I've worked at a college that tried to do that. Good people tried with all their hearts to do that. You know what the name of that place was? Lee College. I was at Lee College as a student and as a young faculty member at a time when there was this almost desperate desire by good men and women to protect students from the real world or from their real selves as students developed. And you know, all it did, my opinion, in my experience, all it did was delay the inevitable, sometimes in very tragic ways. You cannot hold back the tide in your life. You know, you can't just go off to a monastery or a convent or find some place where you create some bubble, and you cannot resist the drives within you that are making you fully mobilized as a human being. And you cannot fail to live in the world and the generation of which you are a part. God doesn't want you walled off from the popular culture. He doesn't want you someplace numb and anesthetized where you can't feel what Jesus would feel if he were here and see what he would see if he were here. And to those of you who are most committed to the Lord, I believe what the Lord wants you to do is not withdraw from the world, but to arm yourself with a full understanding of who you are and who God is, and live in the world without being of it, as you know. But in this, we get a perfect storm sometime. Kyle, let's skip the next slide. I just don't have time for that. I've got 6 rules for how to survive in a perfect storm, and all of these come from Sebastian Junger's book. All of these, he talked about, here's what went wrong that caused the Andrea Gail to go down, and since you'll probably never watch the movie anyway, or you've already figured it out, all 6 of these guys were killed, okay? So they struggled, and there's a long part of the movie where they had their heads just above water, and they told each other they loved each other, and it's really a great movie, but ultimately they all died. So it's terrific. You get everything. You get drama, you get a little romance on the front end, you get good special effects, and then you get that great cleansing moment of a great cathartic cry at the end. Even the guys can sit up in the dark. Who can't cry when George Clooney dies a tragic death? I mean, cheap sentimentality just doesn't get any better than that. So Sebastian Junger said, here's the things that went wrong. And I read down through that book, and I was thinking about Lee students I've seen caught in the perfect storm, and I thought every one of these things fits. So here's some of the rules for survival. First of all, don't lose communication. Now what happened was their radio went out earlier on the trip, and they said, forget it. A prudent captain would have gone back in, got his radio fixed, got his FedEx, yeah, that'd be great, FedEx deliveries, his fax fix where they get the weather charts. That stuff went out on his boat. He had a choice to either go back, lose the opportunity, not make any money, be safe, or decide to just take a chance. He lost communication. So when the storm was converging and the other boats started to head for safety, the Andrea Gail stayed out there because it was out of communication. Now, what I want to say to you, when you come off to Lee and you find yourself experiencing a new kind of life, that's not the time to disconnect. It's not the time. Okay, I'll relax. I'm yelling at you. I don't really even know why. Boys and girls, it's not the time to disconnect from your parents. Now look, I don't like helicopter parents any more than you do. It's almost a joke, right? About how often young people in your generation are in touch with their parents. But honestly, there's not a thing in the world wrong with that. It's the perfectly natural way if you've got parents you like to connect with. This is not the time to disconnect from your parents. It's not the time to disconnect from God. So if you had this kind of intense youth group experience in which you were around people that prayed and you read your Bible and you were doing those things, I wonder if we could go down and have an individual conversation. How many of you just don't do that as much as you did a year ago? And if I ask you why, no particular reason why. You're in a different place, a different situation, you've got a different set of friends, different reality, but if you took an inventory of, am I praying? Am I reading Scripture? Am I connecting with God? The answer would be, well, probably not. And my argument would be, at a time when you could have a perfect storm is not a time to lose connection and lose communication. Communicate with us, communicate with people, communicate with your peer group leader, communicate with your RD, communicate with your teachers, communicate with the friends you trust. Don't withdraw. This is not the time and place in your life to pull back from all these positive connections that are there. So in the face of a perfect storm, don't lose communication. There's a scripture that says this. It's an ironclad promise. The Lord is near to all who call on Him. And I'd say if you got a problem and nobody knows about your problem but you, or maybe you and a couple of others, the Lord knows and the Lord is near. And the nearness of God can either scare the bejeebers out of you or it can touch you in positive ways. It's all up to you. So if you want to run from God, that's your choice. And if you want to run toward God, that's a different choice. But God is near. And this is no time to quit communicating with God. If you sinned last week and you feel that your heart is turned against God, it's exactly the right time to talk to God. Even if all you have to say to God is, God, I know I'm not pleasing you. Honestly, I don't like what I'm doing either. God, I don't know why I'm talking to you because I'm not your good little Christian boy anymore. And God, I especially don't know why I'm talking with you because I don't even know if you're there. Maybe this is just ridiculous, some sort of old man's fantasy that there's a God to pray to. So, pray that prayer to God. The point is, communicate. The one safe person you can communicate with, totally safe, is not your college president. I might not understand you. It's not your parents. You might disappoint them, break their hearts. It's not your roommate. It's God the Father. Always near, always understands, never turns His back on you. Never turns His back on you. When you're in a storm, communicate. Secondly, don't assume you've been here before. The captain of the boat said, I've been in storms. He sat around when the storm started to build. I've been in storms. He told stories about storms. Yeah, we had one back in the 90s, and it was just, in other words, I've been through this before. No, you haven't been through this before. No, you haven't been through this before. So don't assume you've been here before. I'll just go through these quickly, Kyle. Third, don't worry about the fish. When the boat's about to sink, don't worry about the fish. Excuse me. Don't worry about the fish. The George Clooney character had 40,000 pounds of swordfish in the bottom of that boat, and by golly, he was not going to stop till he filled up the boat. He didn't want to lose the fish. He didn't want to go to some place where the fish couldn't be offloaded because then it would spoil and he couldn't take it back to Gloucester. He made the fatal decision to stay and try to ride out the storm because he was afraid he was going to lose his fish. And so what he lost was his fish and his boat and his crew and his life. So if you need help and you're not seeking it because you're afraid you'll lose something, don't worry about the fish. Third, call for help early. Early. Don't let it all unravel. If it's starting to unravel, don't let it unravel. If you made great grades in high school and you haven't been to a particular class in 3 weeks because you're just become a lazy slacker and you sit in your room and every class day that you miss, you get deeper in the hole, then, there's an old saying that says, when you're in a hole, stop digging. So right now, solve the problem, address the problem. Call out there for help with somebody. Recognize that this thing gets worse as you go along. If you don't do something to address it, call for help early. Fifth, if people try to tell you everything's okay, ignore them. There will always be somebody to tell you, no sweat. It's sort of the, hey, hold my beer and watch this. The famous last words of Jackass the movie, right? If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's not cussing. There's always somebody in your life that will say to you, ain't no thing, ain't no problem, relax. Yeah, we're getting a little drunk, and yeah, that's a police car behind us, and yeah, you stole this car, but relax, man. Six, don't give up. Don't you give up. Some of you are lonely and homesick and think coming to Lee was a big mistake. Some of you saw those videos about all these happy people and you haven't met a friend yet. Some of you don't go to the dining hall because you don't know anybody to go with. Some of you are getting ready to go back home for fall break next weekend, and you can't wait to get there because you just don't think you fit here. Well, I want to say to you, don't you dare give up on yourself. Don't you dare quit yet. I'll tell you when to quit. Trust me. I'll get up here one day and I'll say, okay, guys, quit. And when the storm blows, hang on, talk to somebody, connect with God, even if it's to tell him you don't like him, and don't quit. That's it. Let's stand. Let's stand. Okay, guys, enjoy this wonderful weather while it lasts. Let's pray the college benediction. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Amen. God bless you. I love you.